What's up, Yang Gang? So tonight we're going to be talking to Sheridan Lund, and we're going to be talking about the state of the country and what we can do about it, possibly, hopefully. Um, Make sure that you share this out. For those of you who don't know, we will be covering Senator Bernie Sanders, who will be in Vermont on Sunday. He'll be doing two appearances, and he'll be talking about the reconciliation package that he's trying to get passed. And he's got a lot of good ideas in there that would be very transformational for, I believe, a lot of the American people. So without further ado, we're going to bring on our guest so we can get to talking.
Hello, Yang Gang.
What's up, brother? How are you?
Doing all right. Just got back from a day of work, a day of meetings. Just doing the political grind.
So I got to say that you are much more well dressed than I am.
No, it's totally fine. I consider it an interview, and I definitely want to make sure that I'm dressed as professionally as my campaign is. Because I know I do. I am quite young, so it really does help to know that this is definitely the part that needs to be played for the office I'm running.
So you think that by dressing pretty, that you're going to be able to secure more votes that way?
Absolutely. It is partly dress for success. So, and I know that I'm going to be in a lot more outfits like this over the next couple of years.
So tell everybody tell the people who aren't familiar with you who you are, what you're doing, and what you're all about.
The quick elevator pitch is I'm a brand new, young, progressive candidate. I've been a lifelong Democrat. I've recently become a precinct chair, so I'm actually helping organize our grassroots. And I am trying to get our leaders to actually pay attention to our families. I'm trying to get ourselves some cheaper health care that's far more expanded, and to get our families true dignity. And the way I see that happening is by pursuing a line like how Social Security was won in the 60s. You have to describe the specific problems that everyone understands can only be solved by cash. Right now, everyone likes to think of our economy or our individual predicaments in ways where it's the individual's fault, or it's that single bit of fate that person is like that. But it's really, in my opinion, not. It's a much more brutally real story how they just didn't have the money for rent, and the landlord was just tired of that person. So they got lawyers involved, and now police are coming to throw them on the street. I mean, that is the story for millions of Americans. This week, the eviction moratorium in many states have just evaporated. And this is in the midst of Ida, massive wildfires in California. And even in my own state, we are still enduring a massive drought with very awkward monsoons. Like there's been flash flood warnings in some areas, and then fire risk warnings in other areas in the same day. It truly is a front row seat to a lot of America's problems here in my district. So it's really, really exciting that I can actually talk about these issues and help shape our response to these issues. It's critical that we actually focus on how the real world, how our world is quite literally changing, and we have to change with it. Like, not just in climate change, as that is an urgent crisis, but in like our economy. We're undergoing a massive shift, and beyond the fourth industrial revolution, there's a cultural shift in what it means to work. I was talking to someone who made a really good joke about hustle culture, how even like 20, 30 years ago, hustle culture wasn't a thing. And then suddenly everyone's hustling. So you got to hustle with it for some reason. And that's why I feel that basic income is quite important to help us get through this rough patch. Like you're saying with Bernie Sanders getting this reconciliation bill passed, I'm very excited to see how he can actually pressure, especially like moderate Democrats like Manchin and Sinema, to push past the filibuster, or even do what I would encourage, adapting the filibuster into things like a reverse filibuster or a even filibuster. But it still has to be that political will. So that's what I'm trying to push with my run here, is to give that political will.
You're talking about, political will, and you were talking about your age, right? And the reason I bring up your age is because, for a long time, there have been a lot of the same stale ideas. There's been a lot of the same, Democrats are as bad as Republicans. They're all backed by corporate money. We say these we say these letters that are after our name with like a sense of pride, right? I've been a lifelong Democrat. I was a lifelong Republican, coming from the conservative side until, I heard Andrew Yang talk. Talk about, from a young person's perspective, what do you see that is like really, really wrong with the way that Congress is right now?
Oof. When I'm elected, the average age of Congress will drop by a decade. That's the perspective that we need. When you're talking about the Green New Deal, the number starts at tens of trillions of dollars of global investment into every country around us. The things that I thought, like, I honestly did think Trump would be a all right president until January 6th, and we saw a lot of his true colors that day. But when he first came out and was like doing the border wall, I was half thinking he was actually trying to talk about advancing infrastructure beyond our border, like creating security in Mexico to reduce the crime flowing in. And he would do that by encouraging, money in these border towns. It's increasing security in these border towns with like intergovernmental operations. But it was just a show in the years that followed, and that really disappointed me, especially out here in New Mexico. I'm on the border, essentially. It's, in fact, I think I am within the radius of federal intervention in regards to border enforcement, where essentially ICE can do whatever they want in the name of national security within like 200 miles of the border. So yeah, it's very real for me here, and I was hoping to see progress made on that, but in the end, it was like, in the end, it was just a political diversion. And I'll sum it up with the refugee caravan from, what was it, 2018, I believe, or 20. Yeah, it was 2018. It was during the election cycle, the midterms election cycle. And the refugee caravan from Mexico and Honduras, and all the gang violence down there, and climate refugees coming up. There was a whole kerfuffle made up about these thousands of people who needed help coming here. And it wasn't even like an urgent issue, yet everyone was so concerned about it for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then immediately after the election, not even a word, like not even a bill brought up to talk about actually getting lawyers, getting social workers, getting healthcare workers down to these ports of entry to help these people, to actually get them integrated and productive. Because I'm sure you know now, being in Yang Gang with all the data, immigrants do pay taxes. And by and large, the immigrant demographic pays more taxes than any other natural-born demographic. They have a very deep pride in our nation and in the security that we provide. So paying taxes is the least that most immigrants feel that they can do. And I've actually talked to one landlord up here that I'm working with, and he has such a heartwarming story, coming up from Mexico, living the American dream, acquiring a good paying middle class job and building a small bit of land. And now he owns several little houses on it and rents them out and keeps them tidy and well kept. It's truly a wonderful opportunity I've had to see the American story working. But it is in a deep contrast to the national, shall we say, situation.
Let's talk about that national narrative, right? Because it seems like the mainstream media, and this is something that Trump he brought light to whenever he was running against Hillary Clinton. He started calling the news, fake news. He started talking about the deep state. He was one of the first people that actually mainstreamed that term. But for a long time, like my generation has been watching what's been going on, and we understand that like the news is made to polarize people. We understand that that there is a deep state, and by deep state we're talking about the people who are there from administration to administration, who their jobs depend on being there year after year after year.
I've actually said this multiple times. We like to believe that we're like an all-powerful monolith, but the national morale of our people are so low that all of us aren't really contributing to an informed collective democracy simply because we're checked out of it. I'm sure you've experienced them, like my vote doesn't matter, or the don't even really care about politics because it doesn't affect me, even though you can literally tell them about like year after year after year of legislation literally affecting them. Like, what I find the most funny is people who straight up bitch about the government, who know that the government is problematic, and yet you aren't stepping up. The American government is us. If it's problematic, it's because you're not contributing your ideas. And we need every voice to have our perfect union. So if you think there's a problem with the government, step up. That's why I got organized and got all this going, was because no one in my area, there are like thousands, tens of thousands of people who understand that my state, especially my district, is a very cash poor district. We have so much opportunity, so much culture, so many talented people, and such an affordable area with lots of access to pretty much anything, that the problem is cash, because banks in this area think that we're a crime-ridden state and they don't want to risk their money. We're an American state. We are literally helping the poor people of Texas right now who are fleeing fascist persecution. Like, we are very much the most American state right now. I will happily say that. It's harrowing to hear people that really don't want to even think about our government and the politics and how it does affect them. Everything. Politics is everything. It really, really is. Sorry.
It's okay. I understand the passion because, I'm right there with you. I see it myself. The disconnect that people have, because, people are more worried about paying their bills right now than any politician. We're sitting here and we're worried about paying our bills, and Nancy Pelosi is getting more rich than she's ever gotten before based on her great stock picks.
And I do actually follow a lot of those forums, and it is really, really sad to see the levels of insider trading from our government. Like, legit, if you want to get rich off the stock market just as lazily as possible, dig into the 13F, the 5I, and like all the other reporting forms for all of Congress, and you'll have a pretty solid portfolio outside of the indexes. Like, it's really, really painful to see so much blatant financial corruption. But it's kind of understandable. Like, the last amendment in our Constitution that we've applied was 50 years ago. And do you know what it was? The 27th Amendment? It was a limit prohibiting Congresspeople from raising their pay in between election cycles. So they were paying themselves like every quarter. They were giving themselves raises every quarter. So they all agreed that nope, every 2 years is more than enough. We do not need consistent raises like this. It is getting out of hand. And that was it. That was the last thing they could really agree on needed to be in the Constitution. And technically, that was one of the first 12 that was proposed. And it along with, I believe, I'm not even going to guess. I can't remember the other one. We got left off the Bill of Rights. Like, a very lazy amendment, in my opinion.
So what do we do about it, man? Because like I'm sitting here and, you know, you're talking about, you know, we got wildfires, we got floods, we've got broke folks everywhere. Like, I'm seeing this confluence of events happening in America, and it's very, very frightening for me because, you know, I'm raising my son in this world, and it's just like, you know, I want to leave him a better place, which is why I'm out here fighting, you know, but I sometimes I feel so hopeless, bro.
And my friend, I've been dealing with that for the past 2 years before, like January 6th. I saw all this in the background before the pandemic. I saw Yang pushing it all to the fore, that we are in such a difficult transition that we truly need, beyond a simple fix, beyond something that can just be talked about. I mean, I appreciate that Biden is doing this infrastructure plan in a 3-phase approach, but it's still, it's not enough just to stagger them out, to wear down the discussions. We need to really begin wrapping around what the real problems are, and they aren't financial, they aren't even natural, they're cultural, they're within our Congress. These specific people that withhold millions and millions of people, that hold them back and don't allow for the American dream to be fully embraced. We need to call it out across the nation clearly. Our families, all families, matter, and we need to be first. That is the point of having a shared government, a government of the people, is it's our families first, which is what makes it so heartbreaking to see, like, in the American Families Plan, it got straight up and down renamed to like a stupid, boring, like jobs and infrastructure bill or plan or whatever they named it to. They had so many important provisions in that bill, specifically about our human capital, truly our social capital, what really makes humanity worth living. Having nurses that can help you have your kids safely, having daycare centers that can take care of your kid while you're out busy building a career, having strong education systems that are well funded with teachers, nurses, and administrators. All of that was completely gutted because of the Republicans, because they wanted only basic infrastructure, which, in my opinion, is a very limited limited mindset. We need to start thinking broader about our economy, about how we can take the framework that capitalism provides us and apply it in smart and consistent ways so that we can genuinely build out far greater capabilities. That's been our story time and time again. But in the last couple decades, it's kind of fallen out of vogue, which is kind of heartbreaking for me. The whole point of the American dream is we take risks, we take innovation, and there's a government there to support us, to make sure we do it safely, we do it capably, and we do it profitably. And ever since we left the gold standard, our government has really tried to build a welfare state in a limited capacity without understanding the compounding effects of liberal freedom. The bureaucracy, and I make this joke a lot, I completely agree. I'm getting to that. The bureaucracy of the welfare state is hysterical. I tell people, our entire government, for some reason, got together and was like, we need to make this affordable. So the way we make it affordable is we're going to hire a person. All right, stay with me. We're going to hire a person to deny another person money. It's going to be a beautiful system.
Makes sense, right?
Makes sense. It's absurd. And when that really dawned on me, it was seeing in my own area a job posting for for our unemployment office, because it was during the height of the pandemic and our unemployment office was totally overwhelmed. So they were putting out job postings to help deny people unemployment, because that's what happened for the most part here. And I'm one of those people. Like, there's a lot of people left behind with all of this. And the one thing that I hear all the time is, I got my stimulus check, but I didn't get on my unemployment. Or, and even fewer, very few, I didn't get my stimulus check until like a couple months later, but I got my unemployment like that week. So I am all for having multiple systems, but they all need to work with each other. So I'll close off so I can start talking about basic income more directly. But like in my own city, we have a city organization called One Albuquerque, and it's essentially our city's welfare and community policing. I don't want to say attempt, but they're really still fumbling with it, because we have had such a long history of both conservatives and liberals just giving our police more money to solve the problem, when we both know we need more than just police to solve the problems of our community.
Come on, man. Cops have got it on lock. They solve every problem that we have with a gun, and it doesn't matter.
Look, I completely agree. I am not going to at all say, if there's a bank robbery happening and I'm in that bank, I would like to have armed police show up. 100% yes. But if there's a person walking on the street and like shouting at nothing, that doesn't need a cop. That needs someone to help that person actually get into a productive role. And the way you start that is by admitting that America has fallen behind. You know, the reason that Trump's like slogan, America First, was so fantastic was because it was a truism. America has slid back, and it's primarily because in 1970, well, really like 1974, right after Nixon, a lot of our congressional leadership and party leadership admitted and actively chose to spend $10 trillion on endless war. We had an opportunity to end the Cold War in the 70s. We could have forced a global non-proliferation agreement and made sure no one in the world except for America, Russia, and China had nukes. But we didn't. We actively chose to prop up our military-industrial complex and start trying to control other countries so that we could see what nations do and what nation building really is, so that we could, and this is to be nefarious, but it wasn't for a nefarious intent, to continue to undermine problematic regimes and countries. And we've seen that across all of South America, Africa, and the Middle East, most notably in the past couple of weeks. I personally feel that this Afghanistan pullout was 100% appropriate, but it was not planned out in the way we needed it to be.
No, and I understand that, but here again, I have no love for Joe Biden. Okay, he's been a war hawk for as long as I've been alive.
I concur. Like, the only thing I appreciate is he has a new perspective now. He's building a legacy instead of being a war hawk and being who he was. So he's a little bit more sensitive.
That this is the one time where I'm glad that Joe Biden's pullout game is weak. Because I understand that there was some bad shit that went down.
Oh, damn.
But honestly, here's the thing, right? If he hadn't have been like, no, we're getting out of there now. It doesn't matter what's going on. We're getting out of there. What would have ended up happening was the deep state that we talk about, the people who are there from administration to administration, they would have made it into the same thing that it's been for the last 20 years. We'd still be there, and we'd still be planning on how we were going to get out. We've been losing for 20 years. We might as well go ahead and cut our losses now. It's very tragic what happened.
Preach. Like,
but my gosh, I mean, the alternative is I'll take this all day, because I've been preaching ending the forever wars for forever.
And this is really important, because America genuinely did try to do good things in Afghanistan. We did try to nation build after we made the selfish choice to invade for fear and resources. But after we made that choice, we actually took a breath and was like, how can we make the situation at least a little bit better? And the choice was apply the American model, which was the wrong choice. And we will see it in the next couple of months. You're
talking about drone strikes? Apply the American way, drone strikes?
The American create a liberal... essentially, it's create a liberal democracy, create infrastructure that allows increased manufacturing, that encourages consumer spending, that provides a pathway into a developed economy. But you can't really apply the American model when the American model is not specifically wanted. It has to genuinely be in a very specific situation that the American model can be applied. And we're going to see it over the next couple of weeks, because I will happily bet the Taliban legit do the exact same shit we've been doing for at least the past 15 years. They're going to legit copy paste a lot of what we've done. And they're going to have the same problems, because Afghanistan is a very fractured nation culturally. And it's very much something we should all truly learn from as this story unravels, because it's a lot of what my generation has to deal with is a imperial colonial system of democracy applied across every civilization and expected to be contiguous is simply not reality. So like when Afghanistan was being traded by the British in India, it was just arbitrarily drawn around this desert area. But that area was split across several different tribes of Afghans. Well, tribes isn't the right word, but more like councilorships of Afghans. And each one had their own culture, their own traditions, and it was just completely not even taken into account by the powers that be in 17th century Britain. So it has a long history of being problematic, and it's probably going to be another culturally tense international discussion because of that fractured opinion. And we're starting to already see it. Like, there was a news report I read recently that all these councilorships can't agree on how to run the new Taliban and Afghanistan government. So there's even some warlords amassing their armies to start physically taking control again. It's just going to be a mess for a long time, and it is very much America's fault.
There's something that I wanted to pick your brain about, right? Okay, so, and I need to preface this and set it up a little bit. Okay, so we just put out a video a couple days ago about Andrew Yang and something that I saw on Twitter, right? And he was in a conversation with someone, and he made the comment that he said, besides, when October 5th gets here, I'm going to need a lot of help, right? Now, just follow me on this, because I'm like that conspiracy guy that likes to try to connect all the dots, especially when it comes to Andrew Yang and his next moves. So in our video, I proposed the thought that Andrew Yang was going to announce his run for the presidency again and go ahead and get started now, right? Now, to further back this up, I've been watching Andrew's tweets, and he tweeted out one day about some journalists that he really respects. And one of those journalists was Matt Taibbi. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I'm not sure I am.
So Matt he just put out an article that he's been working for quite some time on about starting a legitimate third party. Now, this article just dropped the other day, and he was featured on The Hill. On Breaking Points with Sagar and Crystal Ball. And I know that Andrew and Matt Taibbi are in contact with each other. So what if, in my conspiracy mind, what if on October 5th they announced the forming of a legitimate third party? Because here's the thing, right?
I would love it. I would love it.
I would love it too. But here's the thing, right? There's these certain things that Americans agree on, right? We're all for, like the child tax credit is really huge. We're all for all of us having health care. We're all for ending the forever wars. These are overwhelmingly subject matters that Americans support on a greater than 70% scale, right? So what if we formed a third party around these basic ideas and started pushing them and being like, these are what we can all agree on. And if we get this person elected, then these are the things that we're going to have. And when issues like gun control or abortion come up, the answer should be a patented, well, this is what we need to leave to the states. Those are decisions that the states need to make. Because those are ideas that are very polarizing to people. But if you're starting a third party behind these ideas that everybody agrees on overwhelmingly, it seems like all those people you were talking about earlier, the ones who are disengaged, the ones who are like, well, my vote doesn't matter, all of a sudden might be like, well, my vote matters.
And I would 100% love to see that, but there are procedural problems with it. The party that you're actually describing, I believe, that already exists is like the People's Party. They are well aligned on a lot of cross party concerns, and they do also feel that there should be a limitation on the Fed's power, particularly like term limits, I believe is one of their platform points. And I would love to see a humanity first or like a basics only party. But the problem with all third parties is the ingrained structural political systems, particularly within the DNC and RNC. They actually do write a lot of the bylaws that are adopted by state legislatures, which run the qualifications, which are really the first layer of any political campaign. Primarily like primaries. To get onto the ballot, you need a certain number of signatures to actually get you onto the ballot. If you're within a party, for example, like in my state, I only have to collect a third or a fifth of what a independent candidate, which is what any other third party would be, would have to collect in order to get onto the ballot.
Hold on. I'm sorry to interject. So what you're saying is that if you're running as an independent, you have to collect 5 times as many signatures? Wow.
And that is the structural problems of third parties. It starts well before you even really hear about candidates. So I'm very proud to be as successful as I am, that I'm able to keep chugging along against this difficulty, even being in the Democratic Party. It's still a true challenge to be a fresh new voice against, honestly, a structure that rewards seniority above all else. It really does. And we need to recognize that seniority, and this is the reason why big companies often have difficulties as well, limits your ability to maneuver. Because there are certain ideas and agendas from long past that people have held on to and just want to see happen, even though the context has completely changed. We are not in the world of the 1970s. We are not in the world of the 1990s. We're not in the world of the aughts. Or even 2016 is a dramatically different economy than the economy of 2021. And I can guarantee you the economy of 2023 will even be more different. It's a continually adapting thing, and there's very little you can actually count on. The one thing you can count on, though, is consumer demand and our families to actually put food on the table and live good lives. That is very much, I can put bets on that. Easy.
So what you just told me, okay, so like when Andrew was running for president, you were talking about getting the signatures, and I'm very, very familiar with that because the Vermont Yang Gang here, collectively we came together and we got the signatures and we delivered the signatures to the State House in Montpelier by hand, and we got him on the ballot here in Vermont. So we're familiar with that struggle. And I just can't help but thinking, man, okay, even if it's 5 times the amount, right? Even if it's 5 times the amount, the passion inside, not just the Yang Gang, but people who want change, right? I think it's there if we can just tap into it and access it.
And that's only my local qualifications. There are state and federal qualifications that also limit a third party. Most notably is federal. I'm having a hard time remembering. I believe it is federal financing. I'm not 100% sure, but you have to get a either 5 or 15% popular vote share as a national party to get. I cannot remember if it's financing or if it's No, I remember what it is. Official legitimacy is 5 or 15% in presidential elections for a party's nominee. And with that, you get a lot of congressional funding to create a national party, like the DNC and RNC. But to actually achieve that is very difficult. We've seen the Greens, we've seen the Libertarians, and I think the only one that came really close was like in 1980. And that was still like 8 or 9 points off. So it's a very difficult thing to work through all these qualifications, which is also kind of why I'm running as a Democrat instead of joining in the independent or the People's Party movement, because I feel that the Democratic Party is the best suited for our changing future. I think it was well quoted that Biden is building a big tent. And in my opinion, when he was putting it up, it's definitely a big empty tent. But we're starting to fill it. We're starting to get everyone in this tent. And to say that we all agree that democracy is far more important than any other facet of our government, that you have your vote, that you can actually help influence our decisions on a major scale, is a fundamental need of our people.
But that's just it, man. I can't, like, you're not going to get somebody like me to support Biden. He's a fucking hack. Kamala Harris is a hack.
I'm not asking you to support Biden. I'm asking you to join the Democrats and to stand up and help define the party, because we are the government. We get to define what our nation is. And it's by stepping up and speaking your part.
That's so true, but I don't know, man. I just feel like we're in a new era. You know, you talk about these stipulations and things that you have to have, but I'm looking at like the establishment has built this structure, right? They've got the mainstream media, they've got all these different things going in there.
I won't hide it. That right there is exactly how Biden won so handily. As soon as he announced that he was running, almost every media outlet coordinated essentially a whisper campaign where they constantly shouted his name and blacklisted. Like, I'm sure you followed along. Actually, I think I might have actually watched one of your shows about the Yang Gang blackout, the media blackout during that time. It was especially to see that MSNBC person confirm that there was a legit list of people that could not be said on screen. So the media is a big component of our establishment, and it should be, in my opinion, more formally recognized. Not in any extreme way. I'm thinking like we should only reenact the fairness doctrine, so that both sides of a discussion need to be presented in a fair way so regular people can critically think about them.
But see, while that's true, right, because we are in this new era, people are going to, especially people from my generation, which is Generation X, on down, are not going to traditional outlets for their news anymore. Like the numbers that just the Joe Rogan podcast alone does completely puts mainstream media to shame. The numbers are huge. They're huge.
You're hitting such a nail on the head. So my family is Republican, and they still are to this day in the GQP as well. And it's hysterical that you say that. My grandfather essentially just watches Fox News. My dad watches a handful of like YouTube shows and like reads a couple of articles. And most of my news comes from various articles, a great YouTube channel called TLDR, which does global stuff, and then thousands of journalists that I follow on Twitter. That's how I get most of my news. So it is a true thing that the younger generations are definitely getting more on the pulse, but we still need to bring everyone along. We can't be leaving people behind like this. And it is so sad that we have such a massive generational difference in information quality.
You think about it, man. You know, I'm sitting here and I'm watching this congressman, and he's talking to Mark Zuckerberg, and he's asking Mark Zuckerberg why the hell his campaign email is being sent into somebody's spam folder. And I'm like, these people are making robots that are like next generation, like take over the planet Skynet shit, and you're talking about a fucking email going to the wrong fucking folder.
Yeah, there was a lot out of that congressional meeting that was just a slap in the face of the age of Congress.
It's cringe. It's so cringe.
And it's why I'm so happy to be running as I am, as the youngest candidate in our state's history for this position. And we're a young state too. We're only like 120 years old. Like we're a very young state in the union. So it's really funny that I've essentially grown up in this entire world built with infrastructure, with internet, with extremely abstract entertainment, to be fair. Like from Game of Thrones to like Harry Potter, you know, there's such a breadth of difference that my generation has seen even. So it's one of those things that,
hold on, I got to tell you this story real quick. You're talking about Game of Thrones, right? So when I was younger, and I used to read like a lot of choose your own adventure books, and I was big into like Dragonlance and all the fantasy books, and I always wanted for Hollywood to put out just a huge fantasy thing that would just be epic, and everything that ever came out of Hollywood was so bad, right? And then I was so excited because I saw a preview for a movie, and it was called Dungeons and Dragons, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to be making a movie about Dungeons and Dragons. I've got to see this. So I went, and it had one of the Wayans brothers in it, man, and I think it was like Marlon way back in the day. And it was like the wackest motherfucking movie that I've ever seen, and I was so mad. And then when Lord of the Rings came out, it changed everything. It changed. I was like, whoa, this is what I've been waiting for this whole time, right?
My friend, I understand that feeling so deeply. I also have been yearning for like a long saga game along the Fermi paradox, where you're trying to keep species alive to meet other species. And finally, a game like that came out this year. I've been waiting a decade for this game. I specifically wanted this style of game.
What's it called?
Finally, it's called Fermi Paradox.
Right?
It's legit what I've been wanting.
What platform is it on?
It's on Steam. It's on the computer. It's exactly what I've been wanting. And I get you. Like, there's just, the market knows what it wants. You just need to give the market cash and everything will happen. Like, it's funny to me that we have such wealth of documented research about drug economics and cartels, and how always, no matter what you do to supply, as long as demand remains, supply will find a way. It's consistent. And the fact that we haven't started looking at this in our infrastructure discussions is appalling. It's very clear if people have money, they by and large will spend that money, and generally making their lives better, more powerful, richer. And that's what we're all here for. So we need to start getting like more than just roads and bridges. We need to start getting our nurses, our healthcare work, or our daycare workers, our teachers more more funding and more access to the tools that make their lives a lot easier. Like
Now, see, you're talking about all these noble things, right? Paying the teachers and all this stuff. But my mind was still stuck on when you was talking about supply will find a way. And I was just remembering when I would buy dime bags back in the day, and they would crack down. They would crack down. You'd hear about a shipment of weed getting busted in Charlotte, and you'd be like, "Fuck, man! Now I'm gonna have to wait till the supply line works itself out."
And that is why I condemn the government. I condemn the 70s administrations and the 80s administrations that doubled down on our war on drugs. It was a war on capitalism. It was a war on the people. There was a legitimate good that was being produced in our economy that was, for some reason, irking the government. And the government decided to ban it, like we did alcohol. And like alcohol, that is being overturned. Not quite as fast, because alcohol makes you violent, but the rest of the drugs are catching up. We have weed coming through. Like, I know it's not on Biden's docket, but Schumer really wants to push that. Schumer really wants to see federal legalization, and I will happily be pushing that, because we need to take this money away from the criminals. We need to put it into regulated industries, and we need to tax it. It's a very basic economics, in my opinion. We just need to actually start doing it. And there's so much money potential to pay for things like a basic income. I'd actually like to get back to that, because my plan is a pretty ambitious one for basic income. I believe that we need to actually pin a value on human life and actually define what we are worth. And I believe that the starting point for that number has got to be $2,000 a month. And not just to people who are 18, but to everyone. Kids should have their own little account that's accruing this income, and they should be able to access it anytime that their parents actually become abusive or neglectful, so that they can build their own lives. I mean, I would appreciate if every parent was fantastic and raised their kids well, but I have to be very real.
Shitty parents out there. My gosh, man! I think about just the way that I grew up. My parents, coming from the boomer generation, man, they were hard. I mean, it wasn't nothing to get a fucking beating.
Oh, I know that. I definitely understand that. That was a bit of my earlier childhood. Yeah, kids need to have their own agency, especially now that we're getting into such a wealth of information that I've literally had kids, 6-7-year-old kids, tell me a swear word that I did not know, or tell me a weird sex thing that I did not know. So it is a very, very easy for these kids to get this information, and they need to be able to handle it in a healthful way.
It is, you're going to run into a lot of problems there, because that's just, that's very sticky, because, a child's prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until they're into their 20s. And it's a hard thing, because kids are dumb. Let's face it.
We expect 18-year-olds to sign up for the military and start smoking tobacco.
I mean, I get you. I
completely
I'm right there
agree.
with you. But when I look at my own son, right, and I'm like, I can run around the thing, and he doesn't know that I've actually moved, and he looks around like, holy fuck, how did you get there? And I'm like, your perception is very, very limited right now.
But I've also met 13, 14-year-old kids who are more capable than their parents. They cook and clean around the house and take care of their parents. So I completely agree that not everyone is going to be capable of taking advantage of this. but it should be a freedom. We shouldn't be limiting people because of it.
If, let me ask you this real quick, because I think you brought up a very interesting point, right? It should start for even kids. And let's say that money goes into an account, and let's say that, for instance, their parents pass away. Well, then they would be able to access that money just as they would, normally. But I think it would be a good idea to actually let that money accrue for people who are in stable situations until you're 18 years old. And then all of a sudden, now, guess what? Now you have money for college if you want to go to college.
You see, though,
now you have money to buy a car and to start your new life. That is an incredible idea.
But this is the danger of policy. This is why it takes an electrician, a blue-collar worker, to go to Congress and actually tell these lawmakers what actually happens. Because words are not enough. Just to say that there's like stable situations or to try and define different outcomes for people creates those barriers of the welfare state. It comes out of the noblest intentions, but at the end of the day, someone gets told no and gets shoved into a cardboard box on the street. So we have to ensure the most freedom in a system of basic income so that everyone who wants to participate in our economy can. That's the most fundamental component, is that we have as much economic participation so that people can find demand that they are best suited for solving. That's where I think a lot of people really get confused about our economy, especially the economists who are in the deep state, like you say, who are on the president's ear. They are trying to achieve an America of the 1930s, the 1910s to the 1950s, aside the Great Depression, where there were open credit markets, where there was massive home ownership, where there was a growth of the middle class. But they aren't understanding the economic context of that. It was a volatile time with several wars that required America's involvement, and wars that left the rest of the world destroyed. So it's not that we had a perfect economic solution. It was that we were the primary economic provider. It was a coincidence of the times, not a system to be copied. And that's where I hope to bring a lot of fresh perspective on this. We need to actually structure our economy around what we need the most, which is people. People define our economy, and it's why we're so concerned about China, which I genuinely wish the concerns were more valid, genuinely, because having a strong economic rival to help push us is incredibly important for our nation. But I do fear that China is waning, and it's being seen by their swift change from a one-child policy to a three-child policy in 5 years.
But I want to push back on you on this just a little bit, because I just heard a story on Breaking Points where Sagar was talking about how this Chinese company, well, it was an American company, and when it was a software development company, who had gone over there, and basically, long story short, what ended up happening was all this intellectual property that this company had been working on, the Chinese government just basically took it and adopted it as their own, and now this company now is shit out of luck, and all this research that we've spent years on is now falling into their hands.
So that's not uncommon. That's a very common occurrence. In fact, Alibaba, which is considered China's Amazon, you can't actually own that company. You can only own like a share based in the Bahamas of that company, which gets like dividends from the actual company because of China's financial regulations. But I'm looking more at their macro economy, where they are building these massive cities for a population that is about to invert, where they're about to start having more people aging and dying than being born, which is a dramatic thing for an economy to experience, especially when it's an economy that is mostly males. Like almost 60 or 65% of China is a guy. And you have difficulties when you don't have a diverse.
Hey man, only the strong are going to survive.
I completely understand that, but there's difficulties when you don't have a diverse consumer base, because that's what creates niches that small producers can really get into and capitalize on, that provide a lot of the full economy that Americans are definitely used to, but that China is trying to break into. Because while it may be the second largest global economy, it's still considered a developing nation, simply because of how much of the nation is still very, very rural. So I really love that we have such a strong sense of freedom, sense of liberal democracy, but we also have eminent domain and asset forfeiture laws, which essentially allow our own government to do similar things, in which hard-earned work or talent or money or assets are just straight up taken because the government needs to use it. And we need to reaffirm our Bill of Rights, because a lot of these laws specifically are unconstitutional yet unchallenged, because they affect poor people by and large. And poor people can't afford a lawyer to actually challenge these things all the way up to the Supreme Court. That's where you need to start actually having capable representatives that change the law instead of having an individual fight through the courts. That's why I admire basic income so much, because it addresses the core problem of our Congress. It's not that our families need cash. They do. But it's that we need to accept that creating a complex solution is not going to actually map out to our complex problem. We need to start taking out pieces of this complex problem and start digesting them. And that's where I feel a basic income really will start to shine. It will rebuild our national morale, the feeling that, yes, the government can,
It's amazing, because I look back at my own life, and I'm working on my book, and as you're writing the book about your own life, you relive these scenarios over and over each time that you have to write a draft. And a lot of time it's very, very hard, and it's very difficult because they're very emotional times. And I look back at my own life and I think about how easy the solution of universal basic income would have helped me and my family and every fucking buddy I know, because everybody I know where I come from is broke.
I genuinely believe that if we were to even enact a small basic income, crime would essentially evaporate. Almost all crime is born out of a very basic desperation, a desperation that there isn't support and that you need something more. So if you can hit that before someone commits a crime, you reduce crime overall. And that's what I think is most missed, especially by the very lazy solutions of trying to increase police budgets to take care of crime. Like, these complex problems are deep, and they require more than just a guy or just a simple bureaucratic solution. There needs to be a broad cultural understanding of support.
You know what's crazy, man, is I hear it comes out of Washington all the time, and it's basically the sentiment that poor people are lazy, right? And I'm gonna
That's
tell you something
also
about poor people. Everybody
true.
who I knew in my old neighborhood had a fucking hustle. You know why they had a hustle? Because they didn't have anybody to rely on. And most of the time that hustle ended up being things of an illegal matter because there's not any opportunity. And those ways are the only way to make money. If you want to eliminate people feeling that like they have to hustle all the time, give people money. It makes
It's
so much
true.
sense.
It's true. And it's so painful in so many layers. Like when you talk about the underbanked, the only reason there are people who don't have access to a bank in our country is because they don't have money. Because a bank doesn't think it's profitable enough to go collect that money. Because all a bank is a organization that goes to an area with its system of tracking money and collects money. That's the entire business model of every bank, is they collect money and then sometimes lend it out and then order more money from the Fed when they don't have enough. That's the whole business model. It is genuinely insane. And they won't spend that money in low cash areas. It's just ridiculous. And those institutions that provide like the feeling of an official economy, like most importantly in every town a post office so that we can have communication, banks, actual fire departments and clinics, those things are critical, and they are very sparse, especially like in my state. I even have some rural areas in my district, and it is sparse, the support and services out there. Like I hear about people who have to drive hours just to get groceries or to a hospital or to get basic like job opportunities. It's harrowing.
It's so reverse minded, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's like the banks don't want to put money into these places because
Oh,
they're impoverished.
I,
Well,
I,
here's the thing, right? If you actually put money into those poor people's hands, now all of a sudden they've got money and they're like, hey, I got to spend this somewhere. And so all of a sudden businesses are like, well, they got to spend it somewhere. So why don't we put a grocery
exactly.
store
And
here? Why
and
don't we put this here?
but that's a secondary thing of that the deep state economists think about all the time, is they think about the old capitalism, a capitalism before the 1900s, when we were still dealing with the gold rush, outlaws, and legitimately having sheriffs and posses running around catching hooligans. During that time,
Catching hooligans.
you had to incentivize people to actually go out and collect things, generally for the central government, so that our armies could have metal, or have ammunition, have food, have material. But we have dramatically shifted into a developed economy, and our economists aren't really thinking along with that. They're still trying to capture that middle class creation when America has really ascended beyond a middle class. We need to start thinking about how to make every citizen a wealthy citizen, every citizen a global actor, with corporations that actually change a lot of other developing nations. We need to have a more engaged citizenry amongst these difficult problems of business. And that's where our government really is failing at its understanding of scope. Like I know people try to talk about like these $1 trillion infrastructure packages like they're some big deal, but it's barely 1/100th of what we need to spend in the next decade. We need to really knuckle down and start getting dozens of major global infrastructure projects done. Like
How are you
it's
going to pay for it? That's the question, right? That's the question that every Republican is going to throw at you. How are you going to pay for it?
as the a young person who's going to spend the next 40 years paying off that debt, the solution is very, very simple. You actually effectively tax. The number one problem in our American economy is lack of specialization. We have such a massive culture of merging and acquiring, especially among the big tech companies, where they will just collect any company that it starts to at all be profitable and within their scope. And the reason they're allowed to do that is it's cheaper to bring them in-house based on taxes. Like I was saying, the economy of old was about going out and taking apart the world and creating value-added resources out of it. The economy of today is by going to people and taking their resources out and trading value for it, being in the knowledge economy, knowing what value is. And that's a very, very difficult thing. But it's even more difficult for developing nations. Like I was saying, I want to help encourage every American to start their own business and to start reaching beyond America's borders to help add value to the rest of the world. And that is really where we can start capturing a lot of value. Like Andrew Yang brought up with a value-added tax. I've been saying value a lot. It's like a drinking game. But the reason a value-added tax is so effective, especially as seen in European countries, is it encourages increased specialization, where companies won't vertically integrate because every step of the process would be taxed. So instead, they are in different businesses doing one thing extremely efficiently and passing it on to the next step and letting them pay the tax, like you generally would. And I don't genuinely know why, like, America doesn't just leap on this fountain of prosperity, which we have. We just need to actually tap it. And sure, it's going to create some disruption, but everything the government does is disrupting. Look at what Texas just did. Like, it hasn't even like fully started to take like effect and take shape. But now there's like institutions and lawyers and hotlines for this crazy new law to start infringing on other people's freedoms. Like, we can get stuff done if we want to. It's just, do we really want to do the right thing?
That's just it, because I don't think it's financially feasible for the people who are in power, the people whose power would be disrupted, to do anything about it. And you know, it sounds good because we're like, hey, let's get Sheridan elected because Sheridan's going to get in there and help. Let's get Jermaine Johnson elected because he's going to get in there and help. But what's to keep the politicians who are coming in from becoming part of the machine?
Oh, that's actually where I'm so excited to be such a unique character within my Democratic Party. I call myself a social capitalist. I genuinely believe in the fantastical mechanisms of capitalism, but I recognize that we ourselves are valuable as well, and we need to understand how we integrate with capitalism and the institutions that we formed around that idea, particularly in the value of human life. Like, when you get millions of people, thousands of dollars every month, that's literally billions of dollars being pushed into communities. If these people who are in power don't immediately recognize the opportunity they have to grow their wealth, they are simply misunderstanding what our economy is now. Our economy is a demand-driven economy. It's no longer a supply constrained economy. We can produce anything we want. The problem is knowing how much to produce, knowing what people want and where to get it. That's the biggest challenge of our economy right now, is the physical logistics. And that's where capitalism really shines if we allow it to.
You know, I look at what Elon's doing there at Tesla, and they unveiled this new Tesla robot, right?
Yeah.
Which is going to be a complete game changer for anything that
Oh,
is like.
I love that you brought up the Tesla bot, because it's quintessentially Elon being Elon. I love Elon. He's a fun guy and a brilliant engineer, but he has a very specific way of thinking, and it is not all encompassing, which he would genuinely benefit from. He feels that the problems of his Tesla bot are very limited, but they are actually infinite. To create a robot that's capable of replacing human labor in a scale that you can actually mass produce is essentially to create general AI, to create a robot that can fully understand human speech, fully process human intent, and fully understand humans' vagueness.
So basically, a human.
Exactly. And to program that into software, and mind you, I'm not dissing on his AI capability. I'm dissing on his estimations. He specifically said that this robot would weigh only 150 pounds, and that would include all the motors to operate, like lifting things that are 50 pounds, batteries, the software, and most important, or the hardware, and most importantly, the actual chassis around it. All that within 150 pounds that can last for an 8-hour workday is going to be genuinely a challenge. Like, I don't feel he's quite thought through the entirety of his challenge he set up for himself.
But so let's just say it's a little bit more limited than that, right? But let's say it can take over 50,000 or 100,000 different.
If it could take over a job, it would be dramatic.
So where do we go from here, though? It's almost like maybe we should just tax the robots. And you're talking about putting a value on human life.
Well, you see, I don't feel that a robot tax would be as effective as we need, because I don't feel we should be taxing labor anymore. That's why in the very first platform plank I have is reduce income taxes. Aside from people making over $1 million, they should have a much higher tax rate. But for the rest of people, we should not be taxing labor. We want people to do more labor. That's what we desperately need people to do. So we need to be taxing like capital gains. We need to be taxing value addition. We need to be taxing structural elements of our capitalist economy. We should do a rework of the patent system so that we can actually effectively tax ideas to large corporations that try to evade the spirit of our patent system. Primarily like pharma companies that keep making somehow new formulations of insulin and raising the prices. We need to crack down on that malicious use of our legal system. And we can do that very effectively with taxes. Now, the difficult part of that is identifying how you tax those entities in ways that are productive. Something that I think was not talked about enough on Andrew Yang's campaign was his American scorecard. If you provide tax incentives behind every one of those metrics that he talked about, you're going to get dramatic changes overnight, because businesses will take advantage of every tax advantage they can. That's the number one thing that's holding back most American businesses in the startup phase or in the medium or small business expansion step, is taxes and adjusting to regulations. So we need to make that easily understandable. And the way you make it easily understandable is with a megaphone. Just blare it out every year at the State of the Union. Like, this is what we're doing. This is what the incentive is. This is what we're trying to achieve. Just basic organizing ideas, not platitudes and like fancy BS for a campaign, but specific realities of our country.
Sheridan, I think you've got a lot of great ideas. And before we get out of here, I want to draw attention to the person who got me in touch with you, who you said was your manager?
Yes, he is my campaign manager, CJ. Amazing guy. He's been Yang Gang, I think, as long as I have. And you can check out Boyce Littlefield. What's his actual channel name?
Mindful Skeptics.
Mindful Skeptics. You can check out his channel for my more origin story interview. This is definitely a bit more topical of a discussion.
Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and I set it up for an hour, and usually we're pretty close to that just about every time. And I'm looking at it, and we're an hour and 20 minutes in, and I feel like I could talk to you for a lot longer, because I feel like we're touching on things that people actually care about, things that actually affect people's pocketbook.
And that's what I hope to be. I know I'm not the most amazing young candidate with the most energy and like incredible hope and inspiration, because I do see the horrifying truths of our world, but I do hope to be a pragmatic voice that can help move us through this discussion. It's going to be a deep and difficult one over the next couple of years.
Well, I think that you're pretty enough to win the job. I hope that you have a lot of success down there. Tell people where they can find you.
So as you can probably see right about there, my website, best way to find me, donate please, and reach out to get involved. We're going to get phone banks started up soon. We're collecting volunteers now, and people are getting energized about our young progressive campaign that seeks to do the impossible, really, which is get our Congress to actually agree that human life is valuable, which, when you look at everything for the past 200 years, is going to be monumental, no doubt. But right, I'm happy to do it.
I want to tell you, I think that you're going to be a good representation of the American people. I did notice a couple little times throughout this interview where you kind of went to your little politician side. So you got to be careful of that.
Well, the sad reality is I'm a politician as we speak. I know Yang like to go, I'm not a politician yet, but as soon as you start playing around with the power dynamics and start discussing what our people actually face every day, you are a politician, and you need to understand that to speak your mind and to help change the game is the job of a politician. So that's what I'm doing.
Absolutely. Well said, brother. Thank you so much for being on here. And I hope that we can actually schedule another visit here real
Absolutely.
soon.
Absolutely. I've had such a wonderful conversation, and we have a lot more to talk about. There's so much.
When does that out in Arizona? When does that finally come to a head?
So New Mexico, actually.
New Mexico. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Right in between Texas, Arizona, and Colorado is New Mexico. Right in between all that big old blank space in your geography map.
I passed geography, man. I know where New Mexico is. I just got the state wrong. Damn, give me a little bit of break.
Oh man, it's a problem out here in this state. It's state pride to know where we are.
You better know where New Mexico and all the Gila monsters are.
It is like there's even a shirt I recently bought at like the Range Cafe, a really amazing local business, that says New Mexico's a state, not a country. And I can attest to this. When I went on vacation up in Washington, a wonderful bartender, she asked me genuinely, without any kind of like understanding in her voice whatsoever, "Do you use pesos down there?" I'm like, no, only if you're a weird
Why
Forex
was you about
guy.
to get tipped in?
What's funny is I didn't even have to say it. Her coworker behind the bar was like, New Mexico's a fucking state.
That is awesome. Sheridan, thank you so much for being on the show, and we'll get you on here again real soon.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Russell. Have a great day, all. Indeed.
Yang gang, there you have it. I'm telling you what, look, he set me straight quick. Man, we're in New Mexico. So the biggest takeaway that I got from this whole interview is the fact that even though there's a lot of people who are disengaged in this country politically, there are a lot of young people who give me a lot of hope for the future. And the man that we just interviewed is one of those people. Because I hear him talk, and I hear him talk on an informed level. And I realize that not all the younger generation, maybe we need to give them, as the older generations, maybe we need to give them a little more credit. And maybe we need to, instead of saying how they don't know anything, maybe we should listen to them a little bit more. Maybe we should hear their concerns. And maybe, just maybe, if we can do that, we can leave this world a better place. Because I know that my life is not going to be worth anything if I can't leave this place better for my children. And the same goes for you. And I'm going to try to catch this fly. I love you, Yang Gang. See you on the next one.